A year after my encounter with the swamp monster, I worked this summer as an outtripper for the Toronto Boys Home. They were a halfway house for juvenile delinquents who were about to be released back into society and had to stay at a halfway house for a year. My previous experience with the Outward Bound program and working as a street worker made me the perfect fit for teaching street kids a few outdoor skills. They ran a summer camp just outside Huntsville and close to Algonquin Park. There were 6 cabins with 6 teenage boys and 1 camp counselor assigned to each. There was a main lodge where everyone ate their meals and gathered for talks, a boathouse, and a floating dock in the lake with a 15-foot diving tower. My job was to take 1 cabin at a time, 6 boys and their counselor, for a week-long canoe trip through Algonquin Park. In between trips, I'd spend 2 days in camp, checking equipment and getting ready to take out the next group. I was only 2 years older than the boys and did not have the authority that comes from being a silverback mature male. Working with the guys was a testosterone competition. I had to use all the leadership skills I could muster to stay top dog. Remember, every one of these boys were convicted criminals and street gang members. You could never let the slightest disrespect towards you stand. If some guy as much as smirked in your direction, you have to call him out on it and make sure you put them back in their place. You can never show weakness or fear, or you would never regain their respect. You also cannot have self-doubt. These guys would sniff out any insecurity you may have and use it to their advantage. And finally, you can never let anyone get the better of you. Anyone who has served in the military knows exactly what I'm talking about. Just between you and me, I don't like having to be the alpha dog. I'd prefer everyone let go of their dicks and just come together as friends and brothers. But it is an undeniable fact of human nature that in order to get a group of people to work together for a stated objective, someone, hopefully someone with real skills, knowledge, and compassion, must assume the alpha dog role, or else nothing will get accomplished. There was only one person that I allowed to challenge my alpha dog status, and that was one of the counselors, a petite blonde girl named Sandy. She was still in college studying sociology, and she was determined not to let me best her. When it was her cabin's turn to go out with me, she was the strongest and toughest member of the group. There was one time when we came to a rather brutal portage, going through the woods, along a muddy trail, up hills and down rocks. A couple of the boys were struggling to carry the canoe, and so in true alpha dog fashion I said, "Okay, ladies, drop the canoe and let me show you how it's done." I grabbed the 60-pound food box and slung it onto my back using just a forehead strap. Then I picked up the canoe and started off along the trail. "Hold on," said Sandy. She turned to another group of boys and said, "Okay, girls, take a break." She then shouldered a 45-pound backpack, picked up the canoe, and said to me, "Race you." The race ended in a tie. She sure earned my respect in more ways than one. Sandy was always cheery and upbeat. You never heard her bitch about anything. One day, while we were sitting on a rock by the lake, I asked her why she was always so goddamn happy. She turned to me, raised an eyebrow, and in a weary voice said, "I work at it." The daily routine during each trip consisted of waking up early and making fire to cook breakfast, then break camp and load the canoes and head out on the water. At noon we'd stop and have sandwiches and Kool-Aid. Then another 4 hours of paddling until we'd set up camp again for the night. After the sun went down, we'd sit around the fire and talk, joke, and tell stories. This, for me, has always been a primal experience, and the few times I feel like I connect with people. I would pack a few bags of marshmallows so everyone can roast a couple over the fire and have a sweet treat before bed. On the last night, I would tell all the classic ghost stories I heard on all the camping trips I had been on, ending with the scariest story, the swamp monster. Now here's the trick to telling the swamp monster story. You need at least one other person in on it. You see, one person telling a story is just one person's opinion. But when two or more people join in to confirm the truth of the story, the gullibility level of the listeners jumps through the roof. This is how propaganda works. Sandy and I had a good rapport, so when I started to tell the swamp monster story, I gave her a knowing look, and she got my meaning right away. "Stefan, you cannot tell that story. They told us to keep that a secret, or else we would never be allowed to take them out into the bush," she said with grave concern. "I know, but these guys should know about the hidden danger that is out here." Of course, now everyone was eager to hear the story of the swamp monster, a secret government experiment to create a half-man, half-bear, and half-pig creature that escaped and now lives in the deep woods, preying on teenage delinquents. Remember, the more outrageous and unbelievable the lie, the more people will believe it. Add in as much gory detail as you can make up. "It'll rip your arms and legs off and eat them in front of you. It will make a hole in your skull and suck your brains out." A whole school trip disappeared, and only one child was found crawling through the woods with no legs. With each gory detail I described, Sandy would say, "Yeah, that's true." Now, my routine on these trips was that after story time, I would send the boys to their tents, and the cabin counselor and I would spend some one-on-one time by the fire discussing the day's events. What the greenhorns didn't know was that sound travels very far in the woods. Sandy and I could clearly hear the boys whispering amongst themselves in their soundproof tents. "Do you think that story is real?" "Nah, it's bullshit." "But Sandy said it was true." "She was bullshitting too." Then, one guy had the idea that they should wait 10 minutes, then sneak up on Sandy and me and scare us. I turned to Sandy and put a finger to my lips. Then I motioned for her to go left, and I would go right. We crawled on our hands and knees in different directions into the surrounding bush and crouched in wait. 10 minutes later, we saw the boys sneaking up to the campfire, and then jumping up and running into the light of the fire, screaming and growling. But there was no one there. Where did they go? They walked around and started calling out, "Stefan! Sandy!" But there was only silence. Now they were getting spooked. While crouching in the bush, I picked up a couple of evergreen branches. In the dark, you recognize things by their silhouette. A man standing in the dark is recognizable as a man because of his outline against the background. If I emerged from the bush and the boys saw a male figure, they would know right away it was me. So I held the branches in front of me to obscure my silhouette, so the boys would not see a man, but rather some unrecognizable thing 10 feet tall. Then I slowly stood up and lumbered out of the bush as I let out a low, growl. The spectacle of seeing a half-dozen street toughs scurrying around to escape and screaming like little girls was too much for me. I dropped to the ground and laughed so hard, tears were running down my cheeks. Yeah, I'm a stinker like that. After the commotion had died down, the boys noticed that Sandy was still missing. "Where's Sandy?" they asked. And I said, "I don't know. Last time I saw her, she was sitting by the fire. We gotta find her." Meanwhile, Sandy had seen what I had done, and likewise picked up a couple of branches and held them to her head like some crazy demonic horns. She emerged from the bushes, howling like a ghost. Once again, the boys screamed like little girls. This time, Sandy couldn't hold it in anymore, and she dropped to the ground, laughing her ass off. "Got you, twice," she said. Yeah, Sandy was a stinker like that too. After that night, word went around camp that I was someone not to be fucked with. This is a reputation every warrior should aspire to earn.